So Jett Franzen just released a video saying if you're born before the 2000s, you're lucky. I'm going to tell us this. I was born in the mid 90s. And I'm going to tell us that there's this expression that will explain all of this, where history may not repeat, but history rhymes. If I was making the same video, right, I would be like, hey, those born before the 1990s, they were the ones who were lucky. And the reason is it's because we're all humans and we're kind of seeing the cyclical flow of, okay, I lived this many years of my life, now I'm in my 30s. I see what Jett's talking about and I'm like, man, I know what it was like at that time. And I'll tell us kind of how it unraveled, right? So instead of like complaining or just kind of opining on where things are today, right? The solution, basically, what's next. So for me, basically, what I understand of back in the day, right? In other words, dial-up internet, like I was a little past that time, but let's say the VCRs were common where you have cassette tapes, then DVDs, then they had like laser disc, then Blu-ray, and now we're in the cloud and all these things, right? So like nobody even has like a CD insert for the most part in their computer, CPU, laptop, whatever, right? It's like an extra accessory you need to buy, similar to the floppy disk, which used to always have an entry, which is where you could store things. Then it became like, pen drive. I used to store things on CDs up to 700 MB. So all of this to say, right, how life has transpired, how I looked at it back then, I was like, man, if I could sell verbally, right, like cold calling was actually accepted then, not all these spam and all these garbage calls that we're getting day in, day out, right? All these AI bots, right, trying to get your information. So I was like, okay, back then it was so great. If you're a social person, you're outgoing, you're totally like an extrovert, which is honestly who I am. I actually think back then it's an easier time to make money because you can convey your value, you can understand a lot because you're willing to put yourself out there, and you can basically know the entire world. You can know your community, you can travel, you can do so many things, right? But back then, the one thing that was so crucially understood by everyone was that information was power. And back then it was information is power. The reason is back then, if you don't have the newspaper by the next day, right? There's not like, news articles to your notification to your phone. This just happened, breaking news. You won't believe what happened. Like when there's real breaking news, there's a TV on the other side of this. Everyone would look at the TV and be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? People would talk. People would actually communicate with each other. Now, this seems like a great time when everyone's just forced to be with each other, right? In other words, you don't need to try where Jett was mentioning, like back in the day, you would have one family phone, right? And then everyone's communicating on the phone. And it was basically a verbiage he kind of said. It was like, you have to try harder to keep up relations today versus prior. But what I will say is that before, you didn't need to try. It wasn't I need to try to maintain this relationship. It's being maintained by just going to the same places every day. Maybe that's a cafe, maybe it's a walk in the park. Of course, if you have a job and these things, right? So you're meeting these people, the oil change, the gas station, the convenience store, the grocery store, whatever, right? So I was like, hey, how's it going? How's it going, right? But even back then and today, it's a lot of, hey, how's it going? How are you, right? There's not really a next step. But back then, you would get a lot more words. Like small talk back then versus today, today we don't small talk. People just look on their phone, they look by, they don't even look at you, acknowledge, right? A few years ago, maybe, pre-COVID, you get a, hey, what's up? Or, just like a little smile, nod, hi, how's it going? That's it, right? Even today, maybe, right? But before, you chat about random crap. Oh, my cat threw up, my dog, this happened, that happened. So you learn a couple factoids about the other person, whether, to be honest, it's kind of BS facts. They don't really increase a relationship. But yes, there was more communication. And I would say just seeing kind of the little difference there is because there was less distractions. You're forced to be in the moment, right? There's no other smartphone, someone's calling you, sure, right? Everyone can hear your ringtone. Oh, nice ringtone, right? Like, where'd you get that? Oh, I'm calling you. Oh, man, nice song you're playing while I'm waiting for you to, pick up. Or like voicemails, it'd be prank voicemails. So you can see my face, it's definitely a nostalgic time, right? But the real hardcore facts, right? If you're watching this video, the value is basically saying, hey, I grew up in the age where basically, man, technology, like the dot-com bubble, like all those things, right? It was at the precipice, like stock market highs when I was like, let's say 5, 6 years old or something, or from a dot-com bubble around then. So you do the math, right? Where growing up, it was like, oh, technology is the future. Google, look at that stock. Wow, Yahoo, AOL, America Online. That's not even a thing anymore. But there's, so many iterations of quote unquote the same thing. Now, coming to the job market, what he was saying was like, man, nobody has a job. AI took our jobs, this and that. And the biggest thing, which I'll touch on towards the end of the video, is that, Jett's 1 week away from graduating college and he's grinding social media. So what I want to say is two things. Back whenever I was kind of growing up, we don't know how the labor market or what we're supposed to do, the economy, how do we increase the GDP as, citizens and all this. Like, that patriotism has definitely weaned away. Now, this is not a political video, but there's a lot of reasons for this, right? And that could be technology driven, that could be, cultural influence, that could be so many factors. So this is not into that aspect of things, right? But it's the sheer fact that I basically, as I said, I'm more of this entrepreneurial, outward, business focused. Hey, it's all about, let's say, making money, making deals, being a broker, connecting people, right? So like all these things are human. And today in the technology world, we call it, hey, we have APIs, the connectors between one service and another to another. So you have basically, let's say, a platform which then has all these API connections, which connects all these other apps, right? So in other words, if you look at now the old school, could be the broker, right? I could be, hey, I know that guy over there. Hey, Jill's down the street. Or Jack's over there. Hey, John. Hey, Billy, I need a favor over here for Ryan over here this weekend. And like maybe connecting all these people, you never know. Maybe there's a business angle, right? Hey, I'm willing to pay $250 for this change. Hey, man, you got a cheaper way to do it? You tell me. If it's less than $250, you don't even need to ask me. I go talk to other person. Hey, you do for $175, man? Okay, guaranteed, confirmed, no extra charge. Cool. That's $75 of arbitrage because I knew these people, right? It's not really arbitrage because you're risking the relationship, but assuming this guy's doing a good job, this guy has the money, you're basically making a deal happen. And right there, $75 on a $175 dollar thing is literally, you start doing the math, that's like almost 50%, right, of profit. But I had nothing to invest. It was my sweat equity, my words, my knowledge, my just human presence, right, and little intellect, right, how to connect the dots. So fast forward, it became where, hey, you got to go to school for coding, right? When I was, in my youth, and now coding is like basically, you have vibe coding, you can talk to Claude, you can talk to whatever, make your new app, and like all these things just don't exist, right? So the point of this is that when I started, let's say, working in corporate America post college, and I did the traditional path, right? And yes, the labor market, like my graduating class, this is the part where, yes, you're lucky, right? That just says, I basically had a job out of college. It was like 96% placement for my graduating class, which is almost 100, right? Let's be real. And lo and behold, Trump came into power. And again, this is not about politics, but the markets boomed. Everything rallied, right? The companies are growing left, right, center. Of course, we had COVID, right? So the point is, I basically graduated, let's say, at a perfect time. But the point is, 20 years ago, right, or even 10, 15 years ago, just think about what I'm saying. If that was the AI timing, right, of everything, then I wouldn't have, quote unquote, a job like many people are facing today. And even me now with my skill set, right, AI can replace me, and honestly, you can say should replace me. Because the fact is, before, when you look at skills, right, it was, hey, can you code, right? That was one part. That's kind of the same thing as manual labor or doing Excel or something like this, right? But then code became, hey, there are ways to have workflow automation tools, which is a fancy way of saying, hey, with no code or low code, you could do the same thing as coding. So there's a lot of programs and tools which became, in my timing, what was the expectation to be learned. In other words, they said it's okay if you don't know code, right? But you got to learn how to understand it, at least modify queries, which that's not doing things from scratch, but that was the evolution of what the marketplace needed. And I didn't see that evolution, I came into it. So now think about AI, right? If AI now, right, is replacing coders, replacing all these things, in the end, you need someone who's gonna know how to use these AI type of tools to then do the thing that's next. And it seems more obvious now to say this all out loud, but it seems like, wow, AI is gonna take our jobs, everyone's complaining, but what's next? What's next is, I've seen it in front of my eyes. ChatGPT came out and you can fact check me, but around like, let's say 2022, right? Around like, now it's almost been 5 years if you think about it mathematically. That's crazy. So in those years, it's kind of like AI is coming for your job, blah, blah, blah. That's all the hearsay. Then suddenly you realize, okay, there's economic factors, there's interest rates, too much labor hiring during COVID. So now there's a lot of correction in the marketplace, in the labor market and in general. And so like AI is taking your job as this like sweep headline as the reason why, but there's always just pure financial reasons of the why, right? If you look at corporate debt, corporate just structuring, finance structuring, all these things, but I'm not going to get into the financial topics, right? But simply put, it's like saying, okay, well, this is what's happening now, so what do we have to do for tomorrow? And I am sure in 2010, those kids that are born that are 2020, whoever's born like they're 5, 6 years old today, right? You know what I mean? Like, I can only imagine what they think later on. And I'll give us a good example. I was in the beginning of everything crypto and cryptocurrencies. Why does that matter? That matters because that was like, you know, just like witchcraft wizardry to a lot of people looking outside. They were like, so there's the dollar, there's all these currencies like the euro and the yuan and all these things. So you're telling me you're going to make up some digital thing and this thing has value. And lo and behold, fast forward, these things only get value because the average people, the sheep, right, the NPCs of the world, when there's regulation, like the government into something, people are like, oh, I trust it. The government said yes, yeah, it's real, it's real. And it's like, then obviously it rockets, right? And you know, I don't need to explain this, right? It's kind of like when you realize, okay, everything is just driven by the outward kind of the system, right? Like how things are, it's kind of like, okay, this is what it is, how do you play the game? Obviously, we're not fortune tellers, we're not, you know, people that can rig the market and stuff like this. So how do you best play it, right? So the part where now Jett's like a week out from graduating college and he's grinding social media. This is the biggest part, I think, that I want to say that in this video, right? I didn't have the opportunity in my time, right, to really do the same thing where, hey, I'm like in that college age group and I can just grind social media and do it. Now I could have, right? That timing was there in theory. But the thing is, and what's funny is that no one had proven it out. And in that regard, me as an average person, it's the same thing like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Like, oh, hey, like YouTuber or hey, like social media content, like how is this a path, right? That's impossible. Like, you know, because you just don't know how advertising dollars, platform, you know, the reality, the scalable nature, like there's so many benefits, right? But when you see somebody do it, you're like, oh, they did it, I can do it too. Or it's possible, I can do it. And that is something that I applaud Jett for, because irrespective of how you're feeling, man, if you're watching this or your audience, the point is there is a path. And the path is you're already on it, you have a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs, and that's great. But what happens next, right? What if the algorithm changes? What if things change? What can you do? What you can do is literally know that, hey, maybe you're earning AdSense. Maybe you are earning some money. Maybe aggressively save, right? Which sounds like common sense. And maybe you don't get a job, right? Eventually, even after you graduate college, because now you have the opportunity to use, let's say, revenue from the channel to save, to invest, to obviously have a little emergency fund. Maybe think, you know, do I want to increase the channel's quality? Do I want to have a private membership for whatever reason, right? You have so many capabilities to say, hey, you actually now, you know, I don't know if you have debt or these things, and that's not the focus. The focus is you have inflow as a capability, and assuming you're not, you know, so much in debt or like, you know, on the downside, you have an opportunity now to buy back your time instead of selling it to a job. And irrespective of that number, you can grow those skills and all these things. Now, I sound like one of those guys that's probably like that uncle saying, go learn AI tools, go do this, oh, you're going to be fine. Like, no, I'm not going to say it's all happy-go-lucky. But the point is, you have this chance in your life where you've kind of freed up time and you can have some, let's say, income that's coming in. And now what? You're creating your own job, which is what I wanted to do since the very beginning. I always wanted to be a broker, right? And so those times from the 80s and the 70s and the 50s, I'm not saying snake oil salesman, I'm not saying car salesman, but you can kind of see like, okay, those type of jobs too, because it was just understood. Like if you look at financing and these things, it, you know, today we call it predatory loans and all these things, but back then the dollar stretched further and a lot of people didn't, let's say, need to take credit, or if they did, it was like, hey, I get paid next paycheck, I'll pay you back. And it was like done. Or hey, let me finance for this term. It was a good purchase. It's a car for the family to go to school, to earn income, whatever, right? So fast forward, I'll say this part. I pitch it in all of my videos, and this last part sponsored by me. But definitely, when it comes to money and everything, after all the lessons I've learned, right? I've seen gains in the stock market, the cryptocurrencies market. I've also seen a lot of lessons. But in the end, real estate is the bread and butter. So in the end, right, there's job, there's saving, there's investing, and then there's also saying, hey, assets, the truth, right? Assets are the thing. When you look at any other American, right, out there that's wealthy, rich, whatever, it comes down to stocks and real estate. For the majority sake, right? There's business, active cash flow, but if you burn it all, you have nothing, right? But assets keep on appreciating because of a lot of other reasons, which I can describe in another video, which is going to be more financial and economic type of outlook in the whole scenario. So fast forward, I basically have an opportunity for all of us to invest. I basically am making the deal because all this time, if I wanted to invest into a Marriott, a Hilton, a IHG, a Wyndham, all these type of hotels, right? I can't just say, let me go invest. I can go buy the stock on the stock market, but in the end, it's pretty much me saying, hey, I want to own that in my name so I can give it to someone else if I want when I'm not here, or I just want to, give it as a gift, or whatever the reason is, right? I want to save it for X years, see it appreciate and sell. Like, those things aren't really in your control. But in this situation, the project construction has started. It's a 250 hotel room project. All right, so in these 250 hotel rooms, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, you can basically own the actual property, but you also own in your name the land underneath. So in other words, you basically have land that's being developed, that's then, on top of that, it's a commercial real estate project, and then you have monthly income. And the beauty is you don't need to wait until construction's finished and the business is operational to start earning this income, where you would just have money sitting in this project, right? You're just waiting. No, you can actually get paid month over month, even before the fact. So I'm happy to share all the details. Check out the link in the description below. See you there. Like, share, subscribe, all the things. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.